Yeah, Preston, I think you should be able to share.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Well done. Under pressure too. All right. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to start off with was just a quick acknowledgement of how speed affects safety. I think, everyone sort of intuitively understands this, but the numbers are sort of really stark. So the little graphic on screen now, on the left-hand side of it, you see the 20-mile-an-hour section. What we're looking at here is the chance that someone who is hit by a car going 20 miles an hour has an injury or worse. So at 20 miles an hour, there's only a 13% chance that someone's going to be seriously injured or worse, which obviously even 13% chance we don't like. That's not great. But as you get up to only 30 miles an hour, which is a pretty common speed limit in a lot of places, right? It's almost half of people are seriously injured or worse. So it really is important to focus on how we can keep vehicle speeds low, particularly in our residential neighborhoods where we know we've got a lot of people walking, a lot of kids out playing, and really keeping cars at or below that, 20 miles an hour makes a huge difference. So I did a little poking around. John shared some of the locations that I guess some of you may be in. And I saw some traffic calming features out there, basically. And traffic calming is the word that my industry uses to talk about slowing cars down, essentially. So I think I saw some speed bumps, some signage out there to try and get vehicles to slow down. So I recognize that this is something you all have been working on. So maybe some of the information I'll bring is things you're familiar with. Maybe not. Like I said, I'm happy to dive into anything else. Feel free to interrupt me, to throw something in the chat as I'm going along. But what I wanted to do is share a few ideas with you all around traffic calming. How do we slow vehicles down? There are ideas that can be implemented quickly. There are ideas that, maybe if you're repaving a road in the future, you could look at implementing. I recognize that probably a lot of you live on privately owned streets, which is a little different than living on a publicly owned street. In some ways, it gives you a lot of flexibility because you can try stuff without having to, go to town government or whatever it might be. But it does mean that you also own the cost for maintaining the road and building the road. So happy to talk through any of those considerations as we come upon them. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was sort of something we already mentioned, speed humps or speed bumps. These are something everyone thinks of when it comes to how do we slow down vehicles. Why do we all think of them? Because they're effective. I'm sure we've all gone over speed humps in the parking lots where you drive over them at 2 miles an hour and it's incredibly jarring, right? Doesn't matter how fast you go over it, it's a big bump. And it really gets people to slow down quite a lot. So those are something that we, typically think about in situations when we are trying to get drivers to go like less than 10 miles an hour. And they're very effective at that. Obviously, you have to deal with some discomfort as you actually drive over it. And, there may be some other considerations as far as emergency vehicle access or trucks if they're delivering some sort of, special goods. But in general, they're highly, highly effective at slowing down cars. I did want to make a distinction between a speed bump and a speed hump, though. So on the left is a speed bump, sort of what you're all familiar with from a parking lot. On the right is a speed hump, which you can think of as basically just a gentler speed bump. It's like a speed bump, but stretched out a little bit. It's about as tall, but it's stretched out, so it's a lot softer. And with a speed hump, that's generally something that keeps cars more in the like 15 to 20 mile an hour range. So the picture on the right, if you were to drive over that at 15 miles an hour, you know, you could feel it, but it wouldn't be uncomfortable. It wouldn't be jarring in any sort of way. Or if you tried to do 25 or 30 over it, you know, your car would be bouncing around all over the place. So speed humps are in general very good at eliminating, I'll call it excessive speeding, but they are less obtrusive to people driving over them, sort of less uncomfortable to drive over. And as such, they don't force people to go quite as slow. And both the examples I have on screen right now are asphalt. That's something that could be poured on top of an existing roadway. It generally lasts longer if it's built in with the roadway. So something that you could think about when a roadway resurfacing comes up. There is, however, the option to use sort of rubberized materials to accomplish the same thing. So similar to the last slide, on the left, there's some rubber speed bumps. These are sort of in an alley scenario. Again, trying to keep people going very, very slow in a space where there's probably going to be people walking out from like blind doors and things like that. You don't want anyone going fast at all. And on the right is more of a speed bump, you know, on a residential street that you probably want to keep people going about 20 miles an hour. But again, it's just a piece of rubber that's bolted into the ground. So it's generally a little cheaper, a little faster to install than something made of asphalt. For those in snowy climates, one of the issues that you'll see with these types of installations is plowing. These can get beat up pretty heavily by plows. Some places that use these modular installations actually choose to take them up for the snowy season. But some of them, you know, they can last a couple of winters depending on how heavy your plowing service is. So a couple of options for how to, you know, implement speed humps or speed bumps and what some of the trade-offs are there. And I guess actually, I feel like it might be best if I just sort of pause for a moment and stop talking and see if there's any questions around the group or anything anyone wants to chat about.
I've heard from other co-ops that speed bumps caused a lot of damage for the residents and that they ended up taking them out after they got them.
Do you know if that was damage to vehicles, damage to
Yes.
cars?
Damage to vehicles.
Okay. So, I mean, it all kind of comes down to installation. And also a learning curve. So one of the things that I would recommend if someone were to install speed humps or speed bumps is to make it very apparent, right? The last thing you want to do is sort of throw a surprise bump at somebody, right? We're not looking to be punitive here. We're trying to encourage people to slow down and to know that they have to slow down. So I've seen installations before where, you know, someone just throws down some asphalt. There's no paint, there's no signs, there's sort of nothing to indicate that there's a big bump coming. And yeah, people hit the bump hard, and that can damage a car. Sort of similarly, if the bumps are in place for a while and they get kind of beat up, they can develop sort of like hard edges. So there is a maintenance component to be aware of. But I would say,
and we've got Anne Marie has her hand up as well.
okay. Yeah, so I will just say really quickly before we go to Anne Marie, those issues do tend to be a lot more present with speed bumps. That's the sort of short, jarring ones. Speed humps being more gradual, they tend to wear better. Again, it's intended to be less jarring. Anne Marie?
I have a question. I'm in New England, in Massachusetts, So we get the snow, we get the plows. Our streets are private. We own our streets, so we're responsible for the upkeep. If we take these speed bumps, speed humps, whatever you want to call them, and bolt them into the roadway, what kind of damage, number one, does it do to the road? And how easy is it to move in the winter without causing damage to the road?
Mhm. In terms of damage to the road, I have not seen any scenarios where these cause a roadway to degrade faster than it otherwise would. In general, bolting something into the pavement isn't going to be that obtrusive to it. I've never personally uninstalled and reinstalled them myself. So I can't speak to sort of how difficult it is to take them in and out. I do know that every manufacturer you talk to, it's just tripping over themselves to sort of tell you how easy it is to take these things in and out. But at the end of the day, it's literally screwing something into the pavement and unscrewing it. And in these New England conditions that we have up here, our pavement degrades pretty quickly as it is. I don't know how often you have to resurface, but on the scale of a lot of cities and towns out here, they do it, every 5 years, maybe 10. Yes. And these really aren't degrading the road any faster than that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have something to add.
Yep.
We have 150 unit asphalt, and we have speed bumps. We're rated to 10. We have 10-mile-an-hour speed limit. Our speed bumps are designed really so they don't get dug up by the snowplows. So they are a little rounded. It's almost a cross between the hump and a bump, to be honest with you. But basically the problem with us is you can pretty much go over them at 10. You hit them at 10. People hit them at 10, they hit them at 12, and then they go right back up to 20 when it's a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit here. So that's, but it was designed that it doesn't really get dug up. I mean, we don't bring them up, they're permanent asphalt. But it doesn't get dug up by the plows, but we do have to paint them like every 2 years with, pretty good graded yellow paint.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't really slow down people because they can hit them at 10. And again, the concern is that you want to go bigger and get people suing you because they got damage,
Yeah, I hear that. And there's a chart in here that I use frequently, but I didn't put it in the slides. But like you said, if you want people to go 10 miles an hour and the speed bump, sort of whatever it is in that line, slows them down to 10, then they just speed up after. So typically, like installations I've done recently, I had a target speed of like 25 miles an hour for the street. Like that was the speed limit. And we put a bunch of speed humps in that slow people down to 15. And so the idea was they slow down to 15, they come back up to the speed limit, and then they have to slow down again for the next one. And so in a case like that, it's really to create that level of control of speed. You need to, it would be really uncomfortable to drive on, but to control speed in that way, you'd be looking at a bunch of speed humps or making them more abrupt.
Yeah, the choice would be to add more, on a long stretches, say, I don't know, say 150 yards or something. There's only like 2 bumps.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe adding 2 more might be the answer. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
part of what worked in Rochester was I remember when when I was a kid, they talked about sugar cereal as part of a healthy breakfast, right? So it was like they were really, there was a lot of work being done by a lot of different components. And so what are the other components? What are the other interventions that board members can do in their parks? I mean, so we got speed bumps.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Rochester, we had curb cuts, we had, they put down, the walkways had a fake brick, which for some reason tricked people's minds and made them go slower. And it was like a slight chunka as you go over it. So what else, what other kinds of things can board members talk about and plan around?
Yeah, I have a few other things in here that I can we can jump onto. So we've been talking about speed humps and speed bumps, and you know, that's generally something that gets installed along the street, wherever it may be. Another place to look at trying to slow vehicles down is at the intersections. And the first idea I have up here for that are what's called mini roundabouts. Sure, people in those from the Northeast will be plenty familiar with roundabouts. But this is the sort of idea that you have a typical intersection, and you know, people are used to being able to go straight through it, to turn right, to turn left. But basically everyone that's going straight through it can just go straight. Sometimes there's a stop sign, sometimes not. A lot of times people do think about adding stop signs to control vehicle speeds. That sometimes works at first. When people see a new stop sign, they stop for it. But if there's never anyone crossing the street there, if there's never any cross traffic, people learn pretty quickly that they don't actually need to stop. And so I would, you know, urge a little caution if people are thinking about putting a stop sign in just to like slow people down, because eventually drivers are just going to start to ignore it. But something they can't really ignore at an intersection is a mini roundabout. And the idea here is basically that you put something in the middle of the intersection that drivers have to go around. So they can still turn right, they can still turn left, they can still go straight, but sort of no matter what they're doing, the drivers, you have to turn the wheel, right? You have to slow down and you have to navigate around this thing that's in the middle of the intersection. This is very effective at slowing down vehicles as they go through an intersection, and sort of the more you force people to turn, the slower they have to go. And that's always sort of a tough question in terms of, you know, designing it such that, you know, a delivery truck can still get around it, or a fire truck can still get around it, but also slowing people down. So, you know, this is sort of similar to the speed humps. There are multiple ways that something like this can be implemented or just tried out. On the left of the screen is a concrete island. You know, someone came out, they poured that. It'll be there for decades, and it's done as part of the roadway reconstruction. But it's also possible to try out this idea with sort of temporary or lighter materials. Again, something that you just bolt into the ground, or even if you really wanted to just test it, like a big planter in the middle of the intersection is something that can sort of, you know, provide that traffic calming. I see Debbie has her hand up.
Hi,
Yeah,
quick question. We are in the process of doing a major infrastructure, new water lines, sewer lines, streets. Tell me if it's smarter to plan it with the infrastructure. I'm kind of getting the feeling that it might not work with planning it then, but having more of these temporary things to put up, like a stop sign we could move and put in different places, or the bumps that once the infrastructure's done, we can put the bumps in later. And if they don't work, move them to a different place or whatever. If we do it in the middle of the infrastructure, those are permanent bumps out of pavement, and we're kind of stuck with it. What's the smart thing to do?
Great question. So a lot of places, a lot of communities have been toying around with this idea of quote unquote tactical urbanism, where they basically take very temporary materials, things like flower pots and roadway tape, and things like that that can be installed, you know, very quickly, very easily, moved around super easily. And they try out, you know, what if we put, you know, a traffic island here? What if we put a speed hump here? And they can try things out like that before they do a reconstruction. In the long run, I would say that, you know, if you have the opportunity as part of this utility work to redo the roadway, if you can get some of that stuff in when the roadway is rebuilt, it's probably going to be pretty cost effective, and it's going to be more durable than any of the temporary installations. So, for example, I'll just go back to the speed hump really quick. This speed hump, you know, someone paid to have it put in on top of the roadway after the roadway already existed. And there was, you know, probably a significant cost associated with that. But if that was built at the same time as the road was repaved and fully rebuilt, the additional cost to have that put in is not that high. So I would recommend, if you have the opportunity, as part of utility work or, you know, road resurfacing that's already happening, that's the ideal time to try and get some of this built in.
Preston, would you be available to consult with communities about to do road work to help them think through the most cost-effective interventions as they redo the roads?
Yeah, absolutely.
If anybody needs Preston's contact info, just let me know and I'll put you in touch. And of course, Preston and his firm are Toole Design are out there, but there's lots of other traffic engineers out there. And so, you know, it's a little consultation would go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
To me, when you explain it like that, to me, it still seems like if you do it during infrastructure and put a bump in and then later decide it's not positioned well, it should be in a different place, you're kind of stuck with it. These temporary ones, you can move them, and if they're not in a good location, you can move them. I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Debbie. That is a fair point. You know, I think with there's a lot to get into around placing them, and so I am sort of keeping things at a high level, but it is with a little bit of, you know, the right knowledge going into it. I think it's possible to get these things right the first time around. And I am at the end of this slide deck, there's a list of resources. I'm going to share out a whole bunch of PDFs that are available as resources that might be able to help you get at putting things in the right place ahead of time. Because I will say, you know, just things last longer like that when they're permanent, when they're built in. And like I said, usually if the work is being done already, the incremental cost to actually install some of these is not that great versus coming back and doing it later or buying a separate set of materials that then gets installed on top of it.
Preston, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I didn't know what this really was entailing. Is this basically design work? There's no really social component to this seminar, like campaigns, t-shirts, sign up incentives. You don't do any of that. You're basically a design guy, right?
I am mostly a design guy. My company does do community engagement and sort of that you know, campaign building, organization building. I myself am very much into the design, but I have done some. If there's a specific question you want to ask, I'll be forthright if it's out of my league. But
well, sure. I got a specific question, and it's kind of half our problem, probably even more. So, you know, you can say this 3-4 years or, you know, 10 years ago before Amazon, and they're all problems, the delivery trucks. But it's the common person that is so used to going, 7, 10 miles an hour to speed limit in a city street, or in some other residence, you might be a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. So they're used to going 30, 32. Here, we have no sidewalks, and kids are on the street, and fairly narrow roads. When you say, John, I mean, they're not super wide, they're not super narrow, but
Yeah, you guys wouldn't have the ability to put a circular thing in the middle of a.
no, I know that. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I'm not being. I'm just trying to explain, like, the design part's not going to work for anything what we need. What I was looking for is, like, I don't know. Do you have maybe people sign up to agree they're going to go to 10? Do you put speed limit? Those electronic deals come out. Is there stuff that, like, electronic and takes pictures? And then we're even at the point. It's hard to even find somebody and make it stick in New York. We're not
Mhm.
legally. So I didn't know if there was any kind of social campaigns that really kind of took hold, that made people, agree that they're going to start looking at that speedometer a little bit closer and not just hit 20 with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where I've been thinking, things along that nature.
Yeah. Let me, um, let me poke around a little bit after this. I don't have anything off the bat in terms of an easy success story. Honestly, what you're talking about right now is like, yeah, this is the battle we're fighting. It's kind of tough in that when you try and slow down drivers, we know we need to slow them down because that's how you increase safety. The whole point of traffic calming is to slow people down, and then people get very upset that the traffic calming slows them down.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
I don't want to sugarcoat it. There's not necessarily an easy answer here, but
Well, it literally takes 3 or 4 minutes to go from one end of the park through the other, no matter where you're at.
mhm.
So you're trying to tell people, what are you saving here? 35 seconds? And see what I'm saying? How do you get through to people like that? Does anybody in these groups have any success with making? And the first thing, of course, they say is, you got proof. That's the first thing they say. You got proof. But it's a safety issue for us, because there's no sidewalks, and when you get dark early in winter, kids are still out there at 6:30, 7:30 at night. And you got people just regularly coming down our streets at 20 to 30 miles an hour in a 10-mile zone.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's where we're at.
And there's a question from Christine as well. On the chat, she asks, how could you get them to not cross over to get around? Christine, maybe can you get off mute?
Sure. We had a section of 2 roads where people were always cutting the corner, and we put a sign in the middle of it. And what did they do? They just went to the left of it and went around it.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, that gets to, the layout of this, and actually that's Christine, I can use that and jump to the next thing here. So, another option, if you can't put something in the middle of the intersection, can you put something at all 4 corners to basically make the turn slower, is another option. So on the right, there's the blue arrow and there's the red arrow. The blue arrow is sort of making a very wide, fast turn, sort of assuming this dashed blue line is the edge of the roadway. But if you bring the edge of the roadway out, like is shown in this picture, right, you force people to turn more like this red arrow, which is slower. So that's another way. It's basically taking the exact same principle, but attacking it from the opposite end, as the roundabout in the middle is just trying to make those turning movements slower.
Our situation was taking where that blue arrow is, coming from that way and coming back the other way. And what they did is they followed that blue arrow instead of staying over to the left side of the road.
So let me see if this works for me. So you're saying they should have done something like this and instead they did that?
No, reverse it. Go from the other side coming on. There you
Like
go.
this, okay,
They went like that. Exactly.
gotcha, yeah. Yeah, depending on how wide your road is, if, let me see. Now I've got myself in a bind, I don't know how to erase this.
Mhm.
But if you have the space, there's the eraser tool. They're all drawings, there we go. So depending on how wide your road is, if you have the space to put sort of an island in there or an island up here, and you have traffic going that way and traffic going that way, and same thing here, that helps slow down people who want to do this because they have to go around both islands.
That's
Correct.
what I was testifying about before. They did that on our street and it's just insane. Like it was magic. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, this is highly effective. I actually didn't throw an example of this in here because I didn't know, how much space you all had on your streets. Because obviously with something like this, you need enough space for a car to go right here and a car to go right here, and then for the actual island in between them. But this is absolutely, like, this is a proven safety countermeasure, putting an island in.
Yeah, unfortunately, that street coming in is a dead end. And so that's a good size area there. And they would still find a way to just cut it and come on the other side. We tried it with like putting in a slow down or a sign in the middle of the road, and they just went around it.
Mhm.
But it's that on top of our speeding on our nice straightaways that we have.
If that island could be long, it doesn't have to be that short.
Well, I was thinking one right through the whole middle of the road,
Exactly.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that absolutely is a possibility. One of the things that, if I can continue with the drawing here, if we put an island sort of in here of some width, excuse my terrible drawing, one of the things to think about with that is, if there was a driveway in here, there's nothing necessarily wrong with saying, someone can only get in this direction or out in this direction. But to that point of coalition building that was brought up earlier by, I think it was David, the more intense some of these get, the more you have to do some coalition building to get people on board, because it's going to have more effect on people's day-to-day, But yeah, so intersections, I think, broadly speaking, there's opportunities at intersections. I think a lot of times you just see two roadways meet and it's just open asphalt. Oops, clear this. There we go. You just see two roadways meet and there's a bunch of open asphalt in the middle. And if you can think about spaces where, maybe you put this traffic circle in the middle, maybe you think about, can there be a curb extension here to tighten this up so people can't drive as fast around this corner? Or maybe we can put an island in the center. This is the kind of thing that it's honestly, I can't recommend a single typical treatment that's right for every community and every intersection. It's sort of difficult to to do that without actually looking at the specific issues. You know, how are people driving through there? What do the roadways look like as they approach the intersection? But I will say, in the vein of tactical urbanism, this is the kind of thing that can be tested. You know, if you have some sidewalk chalk or some heavy duty tape, and some flexible posts, you can, especially again, this is some of the flexibility you might have on a private street network. You might be able to go out and say, you know, work with your community and say, hey, we want to try something to increase safety for a lot of the residents, a lot of the kids that are out playing, the people that are out walking. You know, would it be okay if we striped out, you know, the middle of the intersection, we just stripe a circle in there and put some flexible posts that people have to drive around, things that can be taken out easily, things that if someone does hit them, they're flexible, right? They're not going to damage a car too much. It's sort of, you know, to limit your exposure there. But if you went out and painted this and put a couple of flexible posts in the middle or something like that, with reflector tape on them, you know, try it out, see if that works. If it doesn't solve it, maybe try the corner, maybe try the island.
Just to clarify, everybody on this call has the power to, there's nobody they are beholden to. They are the decision makers around the roads. But they have to talk to their municipalities about like fire trucks coming in and out though.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's 7:18, just to give you a heads up about the time. If you had other slides to get to that you wanted to.
Yeah, I do have one more that I wanted to talk about. So the other thing so curb extensions, yeah, we talked about this a little bit. This is an example of a curb extension done fairly quickly, sort of like the speed hump asphalt that was poured on top of the existing road. So something that can be installed relatively easily. The last thing I wanted to talk about was chicanes. And this is something that, you know, if you have a long access road or if your blocks are longer, this might be an interesting idea. So the idea of a chicane is basically not allowing someone to drive in a continuous straight line uninterrupted for a long period of time, because when you're driving straight, it's really easy to pick up speed, and that's what people do. So with the chicane, you basically turn a straight road into a curved road. So, you know, in this image here, this road, if there wasn't anything built in there, someone could just drive straight, and they could do that really fast if they wanted to. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't, but they could. The chicane takes the straight road and basically forces someone to drive like that. Because they're making all these turns, they have to drive slower. And so this is, I would say this is particularly effective, like I said, in some of those longer uninterrupted blocks, or if there's a long access road that people are picking up speed on. You know, this could be a really easy way to sort of slow people down. And again, I, you know, want to keep home the idea that what you see here is constructed, and honestly, it looks like it was constructed decades ago. You got grass growing in it. You've got, I don't know if these are granite or concrete, but you've got curbs that are set in the asphalt. This is constructed, and it's constructed a long time ago. You can accomplish the same thing with curb stops, rubber curb stops, concrete curb stops, paint and flex posts to try it out, tape and flex posts to try it out. I think I have an image somewhere of, you know, someone put down basically hay bales to do this too. There's a lot of flexibility there. The key thing to focus on when you're thinking, you know, if you're thinking about something quick to try out an idea, is making sure it's visible at night. There's all these reflective signs all over these. You don't want people hitting these, whether it's a hay bale or not. The goal isn't to make someone hit something that they didn't see. So making sure that things are visible at night. You also don't want anything that's too tall or difficult to see around. Think about if there is a kid playing in the street, you don't want anything that's as tall as a child, because you want that child visible at all times. But all of that to say, I'm bringing a few design ideas here, and they're great when they're constructed, but they can also be done quickly, deeply, in a way that lets you test them and move them. So that's kind of what I had for design options. We are getting close to the end of the meeting. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the idea of access management. This is another thing that I would say, coalition building, sort of getting people on board is important for. If you're seeing, a million different deliveries to every single household in a neighborhood, is there an opportunity to consolidate some of that? I honestly don't know, but it's sort of a question worth asking. A shared delivery area, something along those lines. People often think about, I want to reduce traffic on the street because there's a lot of speeding. Can I make one-way streets so people can't drive on it as easily? Can I make it so people can't turn at one location? Excuse me, something like that. Those are all definitely possible, but it does get very complicated very quickly, because if you're moving traffic off one street onto another street, who are you affecting positively versus negatively, and things can sort of spiral. So I wouldn't take that off the table, but I would, be aware. It's sort of like putting a stop sign in. It's probably not what you want to do as your sole solution, but it is something that could be considered.
Preston, we have some questions on the chat about traffic motion sensors. Dave and I were looking into them. They're around $3,000 each. You can get cheaper ones from China. Debbie asks, how do traffic motion sensors work? Tells a motorist how fast they are going. Seems drivers don't think they are speeding. I guess Debbie is saying, it seems that drivers don't know how fast they're going.
So you're talking about the signs that basically say how fast you're going?
Yes.
Yeah, the ones that monitor your speed as you're going past, it says your car is going 10 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I found them on Amazon, couple $1,000s. Do they work?
So the city of Boston, where I am right now, did install a number of speed feedback signs a few years ago, and there was some modest reduction in speeding. I wouldn't call it a panacea, but I'll see if I'll add that to the list.
Yeah, I do have some studies on that, and I can share that with you, Debbie.
Yeah.
And modest is what the studies, it's noticeable, but modest is how I would characterize the results that I saw.
From my understanding, we cannot fine our residents if we cannot prove how fast they're going. So, educating folks so they learn themselves how fast they're going seems to make more sense than handing them a piece of paper and fining them. Because I don't think it'll stick. I don't think legally we can fine someone for speeding unless we can prove it.
So yeah, this is, so it's almost like we're going to need a part 2 on this, because Dave was bringing up, what would a social campaign look like? We know the DARE program didn't work. We know Just Say No didn't work, but we know that the litter campaign that they did in Texas in the 60s did work. So there are certain principles about social campaigns, and we know there are some things you can do that work and some things you can do that have no impact. So maybe that's a part 2 for this kind of thing.
Yeah, potentially. Like I said, I want to poke around and education campaigns. We typically think of the hierarchy of ways to improve safety, and the engineering, the design stuff, is typically, the most effective way to do it. But that being said, it's not just about asking people to go slower. It can be about asking people to get on board with things that require everyone to go slower. There's a number of ways to approach that.
Any final questions from anybody?
I got one. What's the recommended speed bumps put in an area as far as your length?
So the work I've done, I haven't done too much work on like 10-mile-an-hour streets. For 25, we aim for about every 250 feet. Yeah.
Okay, because we got a 10-mile speed limit on our streets, and we got a few in there now, but like they say, they speed up between each bump.
Yeah, and it's a function of how long it takes the car to get back up to speed between each bump. And at 10 miles an hour, it's really, it's going to take very little time for them to get up to speed. So in order to enforce that solely through speed bumps, it would have to be pretty frequent. Yeah, I don't know that I can give you a specific number off the bat right now, but it would need to be a lot to keep people at 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So Preston has some resources here. If you put your email address in the chat right now, if that's possible, if you're able to do that, I will be able to get these links to you in an email later this week.
Yeah, and I tried to provide, excuse me, sorry about that. I tried to provide a range of resources in there, and quite a few of them focus on, what can be done sort of on the quick. Some of these guides really do get into community involvement. I said I wasn't coming into this discussion with that lens, so I apologize for not really being ready to speak to it. But there may be something you find in there around community engagement, if that's what sort of the angle that is most appealing. But there's a lot out there. Like John said, there's a lot of resources and certainly a lot of consultants. And I'm happy that I can bring some ideas today. I hope you all found that valuable. And I'll try and find some quick additional things to throw in these resources. Yeah, I appreciate everyone's time and questions.
Well, Preston, thank you so much for jumping on board and helping us out here. This has definitely been a good start to the whole conversation. And I just want to lift up one of the things you said was that the most effective, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard you said was the most effective we can do is design changes. It's that the actual changes to the environment impact the behavior with the highest rate of impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, very cool. Thank you, everybody. And, you know, let's stay tuned. This idea of social engagement can also be a part of it. And I'm not sure what a round 2 might look like, but let's keep thinking about that. So thank you very much, Preston.
Thank you all. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
Have a good rest of your nights.
You too.